I love this. I haven't done anything yet, and the only way is down. So, welcome, good afternoon, and welcome back to this arena stage of South Summit. First day. How are you? How was lunch? There's only a couple of people in the first row. How are you guys at the back? Oh, wake up. Well done. Okay, for those of you who were here this morning, the MC was Paris. My name is Helena. And I was thinking, Paris, Helena? You know, in the Greek mythology, Paris kidnapped Helena because she was obviously the most beautiful woman in the world. You can see, we keep in the tradition. Now we're beautiful and clever. And in South Summit, though, Paris and Helena would just swap stages, equal rights. But let's leave Greece and let's take a journey. We're going to travel this afternoon. We're going to take a journey into the unknown. Would you like to come? Excellent. When you were kids, maybe, like many other kids, you dreamt of becoming an astronaut, of going into space. But do you know how many applications they receive in NASA every round? Come on, give me a number, guess. How many applications to become an astronaut in NASA every round? Who wants to give me a number? 200,000. Ala. ¿Dónde vas? Between 4,000 and 8,000 every round. But how many of these make it? Between 8 and 35. Well, our next guest, she made it in 2009, and she made her dream come true. Well, she's here today to tell us everything about it and what it needs to have, what you need to have if you want to have the right stuff. So please, let's welcome Jeanette Epps. Jeanette! Welcome! Take a seat there, thank you. Welcome. Jeanette is going to be interviewed by Juan Cruz. Many of you know him. He's a journalist from our lovely newspaper, El País. So welcome, Juan. Welcome, Jeanette. The stage is yours.
Gracias.
Thank you.
No, thank you, sir.
Very glad to see you here in front of this beautiful audience, joyful and youngful.
Yes. Yes.
You feel like you are on Earth, looking at them. They are the Earth, no?
They are there, yes.
Yeah, and they are learning. That word learning is very important in your life. You have learned almost 3 or 4 matters.
Yes.
You have been in the motor company, you are being in the CIA, you are being in the competition for looking near the sky. Learning, what means for you?
Well, that's a very good question. For me, I think learning is a lifelong thing, something you never want to stop doing. And I do remember when I was selected for the Astronaut Corps, I was 38, and the thought came to me that, wow, I'm going to go on to a whole other life where I'm going to learn something totally new. And I was excited. It was not easy, it was tough, but the joy of learning gets you through everything. Once you start in the process, I think learning should be a lifelong journey. Even traveling to other countries to find out the history of different places, one of my favorite things to do. So everything in life should be about learning something new, even learning other people.
What have you learned from the motor company where you were working?
Well, one of the reasons I left Aerospace to go to Ford Motor Company was because I had worked 7 years in aerospace as a graduate student, and you can kind of get a little burnt out. But I also wanted to go somewhere and take everything that I learned in graduate school and apply it to something totally new. And it's kind of like, for my advisor to say, hey, look, I actually learned a ton, and I can apply it to anywhere. So working at Ford Motor Company really helped me to hone and sharpen my engineering skills. But the aspect that I learned most that you don't really learn in graduate school is about manufacturing. You know, I can go into a lab and I can make anything work. But how do you build something that you can actually manufacture and manufacture millions of them and put it on a vehicle and it works every time? So I learned a ton about processes for manufacturing different things that we do in the lab that are possible but may not be possible when you start looking at it differently.
And why did you select that particular matter to begin with your working time?
Well, it's interesting because I could have gone to Bell Helicopters or other places, but I really wanted to do something totally new and learn just from scratch about vehicles. Even though it's another mechanical beast like a helicopter, it's just this whole idea of learning. It goes back to that, doing something totally new. I had done helicopters in graduate school for 7 years. And like I said, you know, after you've learned all you can, or you feel like you've learned all you can, there's always something you can learn. I felt like, you know, it would be great to try something new. And I also made sure that I took calculated risks, you know, things that I knew were, you know, going from helicopters to vehicles, you know, working on, so in graduate school I was working on smart materials. And I knew that if I could apply it to a helicopter, I can apply it to a car.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of learning and learning something new and constantly growing is, I think, is kind of like a thread in my life.
Yeah, but we conceive the motors as being down to earth,
Yeah.
and then you select gravity as your new model of looking at life. No?
Yeah, so as a kid, dreaming about the stars and, you know, thinking that I'd never get selected for the astronaut program, but, you know, going on to do aerospace, you know, I think as a kid, we believe anything is possible except getting into the astronaut corps. But you look at the stars and you just kind of wonder. You wonder what's out there. You wonder if aliens actually do exist. You wonder, how close is that star? Is that star really twinkling? Why does it twinkle that way? And then you see something dash across the sky, and you're like, was that a shooting star? And I think little kids, you know, as a child, you know, we would wish upon anything that moved in the sky because you see all these beautiful stars, and you just start to make up stories in your brain.
Maybe everything begins with curiosity, no?
Oh, definitely.
The curiosity of children. In a way, we never stop of being a child, looking at the stars or the sea, or listening to the motors, etc.
And even after being selected as an astronaut, there's been many times where we've had events and you feel like a kid because it's something so new you haven't seen before, and you get that wonderment that you had as a child of seeing something new. Like I was telling you the story about looking through the Level telescope and seeing the Saturn and seeing the rings around it for the first time, and how excited I was to see that. It was like being a kid again. And so there's been many events like that, even just getting into the spacesuit to do a practice spacewalk. I mean, it's this giant suit. It's like 300 pounds, and you know, it's every time we do it, it's like being a kid again.
Yeah, but the task, Jeanette, of being astronaut, if not play school, you have to learn very toughly, no? Very, very, very hard.
Yes.
What did you start learning first? What did you learn from the beginning? What was imprescindible to be an astronaut?
Well, one of the reasons I went ahead and applied was being overseas and being in different places and learning. Once you design something as an engineer and it goes out in the field, or like a fighter jet or something like that. So there's two different sides of being an engineer. You can be an engineer that stays in the lab, or engineer scientist that stays in the lab, designs things and builds them, or you can be the person out in the field actually using these things. So one of the things that led me to applying for the Astronaut Corps was actually becoming an operator. You know, working overseas with the military and working with different groups and using the tools that we developed in labs and using them out in the field kind of lent this idea to me that as an astronaut, you really have to be very, very technical, but you have to be very operational, because a lot of the things that we do on the space station, you're someone else's eyes and hands. You're some scientist's hands doing the experiment for them. But each person in and of themselves is an experiment as well. So that experiment will go through exercise, they'll take blood, and they'll take different samples from that person as well. So being a very technical person and being an operator go hand in hand for an astronaut, I think. And so that's where I kind of got this notion that maybe it's time that I go out and apply.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, as I got into the astronaut corps, it was nice to see that that is the truth. You know, learning to, as a research scientist, learning to fly backseat with a fighter pilot is very, very daunting initially, because you're in a supersonic jet, you're in a high-threat environment, and you got to learn how to work with this person who's an expert at flying these things.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first notion that, yeah, you have to become a real operator to learn to fly this jet. So there's a lot of things like that in the corps.
There's something that the children and the adults have without they knowing even how to tackle them. It's fear. Did you learn to go against fear?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think...
How you learn to be fearless?
Well, I think the desire to do something supersedes that fear in a lot of cases.
Yes.
But, I mean, I think it would be crazy to think that all astronauts never have fear. They just go and do X, Y, and Z. I think the difference is that I think we have fear, but we just go ahead and do it anyway. Because our desire to get to that point, to fly in space, to fly a jet, to do a spacewalk, all fear is minimized, because that desire, and I think the wonderment, like a child, also kind of plays in that. You really want to know what's going to happen. You really want to know what it's like, and you want to become good at it at the end of the day as well. So you have fear, but you know, it's what are you going to do with it? Are you going to let fear keep you from living? And for me, living is, you know, flying in the jet, doing all the things that we get to do as an astronaut. So, you know, I would rather live than live in fear. Yeah. Live in doing all these things than, you know, I don't think living in fear is living. I think it's kind of like a slow death almost.
To go into NASA should be difficult. What was your impression coming in there?
Well, I mean, my impression coming in, I came in with 9 other Americans, very highly technical people, and very competitive people. And so my initial impression was that, wow, I've got some work to do. We're going to be very busy, and it's going to be very competitive. So it was a tough group, a very good group, though. So my impression of NASA was that it was very different from anywhere I had worked, even though I had worked in the government for 7 years, but this was totally different, and it's unlike anything else that I had experienced. So it was an eye-opener on how you know, fascinating the people were, how experienced they were, and then I have to make sure that I'm competing and competing well.
In that case, what is inside the word competition? How do you feel competition with others, or against others, or about others?
Well, so I'm a twin, and so I think the way that I viewed the competition was that I have to compete with myself. I know what the standards are, and I know that I want to be well above that and make sure I'm doing very well. So it's really a competition with myself to make sure that I'm pushing myself and doing the things that, as well as anyone else in the group, if not better, and trying to make sure that I'm competitive in that sense. So it's not really competing with other people, but making sure that I'm meeting and exceeding the standards and doing well as well as everyone else.
Can you imagine maybe this audience, somebody in this audience wants to be an astronaut? What are your advice in favor or your advice against?
Well, my advice in favor is that I think as a kid, we, adult kids too, you always dream of doing something big and you want to exceed even your own imagination. And so I think when you think about becoming an astronaut, you should really make your current career and your life what you want it to be. And you have to be in the job that you completely desire above everything else, and then apply, because you want to make sure that even if you don't get into the astronaut corps, you will have a life that you're very satisfied with. And I can't really think of the cons against applying to the astronaut corps. I think that space is for everyone. I mean, it is our next frontier, I think. I mean, I think the human nature to explore and to go beyond where you are is well and alive, and I think that's alive in everyone. So I think if you have a desire to apply and think you want to do it, I don't see why not. I think also, if you don't get it, there should still be some satisfaction in life. And the satisfaction should come from a career that you love and that you would do above everything else. And being an astronaut is kind of like, for me, it was kind of after having achieved in engineering and working a job that I loved, it was definitely more than just a dream come true. So, and it is one of those things that many people apply and don't get, but I still say apply. You never know what can happen. I'm an example of that.
A dream, you say?
It is definitely a dream.
You are in the dream now? It's always a dream?
Well, not always a dream. I mean, things can happen. But what keeps me going, though, is that I still get to do, even after 9 years of being in the astronaut corps, I still fly jets. We still do spacewalk training. We still have these other projects that we can work on. And currently, I'm working on the NASA Orion, which is slated to go back to the moon. And so it still is somewhat of a dream, even though after 8 years of what seems to be doing the same thing over and over, I'm still doing things that I would not be able to do if I wasn't selected for the astronaut corps.
You were not born when the first man went into the moon. Have you seen those images?
Oh, I've seen plenty of those images. I love.
You want to
those
be
images.
one there?
I would love to be one of those people. And in fact, even after I did watch on television as a teenager the Challenger accident. But even then, that kind of propelled me forward to think, oh, we really got to fix this and keep going. And so seeing the moon shots makes me think, well, why haven't we gone back there again? So the fact that we're doing that now, that is kind of like a dream. So once we do that, I'm very excited to see how everything goes, because one of the big things that we're doing now with the NASA Orion is we're using a lot of the stuff that we will use a lot of the stuff for going to the moon to go to Mars. So the moon hopefully will be like an engineering test bed for everything that we need to do for Mars. So once we do that, then Mars seems closer. So it's very exciting now.
What is like to be there, into the space, no coming back for days, being in another world, really?
Yeah.
Psychologically, how it affects you, that loneliness?
So I think it impacts everyone when you're away from home, you're away from your friends, family, even though your crew is your friend and your family, they're not your close family. I think that having a common mission and a common goal bonds the group together. And so for me, I wouldn't feel as lonely. I think having a group of guys that I'm working with, we have a common goal, we have a common mission, we know that it's for a certain amount of time, and once we do our job, we're coming back home. Also understanding that anything can happen in between there is kind of like a sobering reality that you have to accept even before you apply to be an astronaut. So anything can happen when you're in training, when you fly a mission, and on the way back home, anything can happen, and you have to accept that reality. So I think it is, in the future, thinking about the people who will go to Mars and do those things, selecting people who can adapt easily, be very flexible, will be crucial. Also, you can be the smartest person in the world, but you have to really be able to get along with people no matter what happens, and make a decision, a conscious decision to behave a certain way and to perform a certain way. Because when things go bad, and things can fall apart easily, but making a conscious decision ahead of time and proceeding forward based on that is very important. And that's how the team survives.
Do you have any hesitation when things go bad in another missions? Do you have hesitations about your own vocation?
No, because that's what you accept when you apply to the astronaut program. And knowing that anything can happen anytime, we just recently had there was a hole found on the space station in one of the Soyuzes. So even with knowing that and seeing that, that's part of the whole process of being an astronaut. Things will happen. How do you respond to them is the question. And we train so much for things to happen, like even a rapid depress on orbit. Mm-hmm. Before you go to space, you're trained ad nauseum on how to handle anything that happens, like a rapid depress, a fire. We could have a toxic leak. So, we're trained to handle those things.
Yeah. And that capsule could be a little continent, an island, no?
Yes.
And you are the inhabitant of the island. In that island, there is conversation,
yes,
a relaxing time, people laugh. Mm-hmm. How is life, real life there, apart from the technical missions?
Well, you really do bond, especially through going through training. You, as a group and as a team, you bond together through all of your training. And so it should be the same exact feeling as you're in the capsule. We do a final exam, and we spend all day in the capsule together, even though we have the training team with us. So all of the things that you go through together throughout your training really bond you together and make you a team and make you a real crew. And so it should be the same feeling as you go to space. And you should feel like it's a normal day, just no gravity. So I think that what you hear from a lot of individuals as they come back from space is that it was like training.
Have you seen that film, Gravity?
Yes. It was very different from what the real thing would be.
Yeah,
yes.
Very different.
Very
In
different.
what is different?
Well, for example, as a crew in the Soyuz, there is the commander, and the center seat is always the Russian person. And then the left seater is the person that really is the second in command in the Soyuz. And then you have the right seater. The right seater is there to help in any way, shape, or form that the rest of the crew needs. And so with Sandra Bullock being alone in the Soyuz and being able to run everything, even though she was never in that center seat, it's kind of little things like that. And then there were a couple of things that were like getting in and out of the spacesuit, and even some of the quantum mechanics and orbital mechanics, happened.
Would you accept me in one of those trips to the moon?
I think if you applied, we have to see what NASA would say.
Thank you very much, Jeanette.
No, it's my pleasure,
And
sir.
thank you to you.
It's my pleasure. Nice to talk. Thank you.